Hello there. So today I have the results of a little metagame poll I did earlier in the week. So one thing up front, this poll was posted shortly after the ban list went up, and I want to say pretty much all the results came in both before the Star Trek previews and of course before the Let's Talk UVS webcam event over the weekend. So, you can apply to this a little bit of grain of salt in terms of, maybe there's some of the freshly previewed Star Trek characters that'll have a little interest and probably a bit of an uptick for Bertolt 1 after this last event, but nothing earth shattering, right? Everything in here should still be pretty accurate in terms of what people are considering for their, Nats and potentially Worlds testing coming up in a couple months here. So, if you haven't seen the poll itself, the question was if you had to pick only 5 characters and say, I'm going to run one of these 5 for Nat/Worlds, and I'm, given we have a couple months to work on these things, but these are the 5 characters I'm most interested in right now, name those 5 characters. And so, people filled out the Google form. We got, I believe, 74 responses. Some people didn't fill out all 5 slots, but I think 350 characters got named, I think it was. So I'm going to show the results in terms of percentages, what percent of lists did this character show up on, and we'll go through those, and it should give us a pretty good picture of where people's interest is beyond just, if you just ask what the top characters are, you're going to get a lot of the same bandwagon results. So it's a little more interesting to frame it this way and get a little more biasing towards what people are actually considering running. And there's a couple surprises on here, mostly nothing too shocking. But yeah, without further ado, our top 5 characters. 31%. Izuku Midoriya on the move. Probably not too surprising. A 6-hander, people like 6-handers, very, widely accessible. There's all sorts of different things you can do with him. Very obviously, clearly good. The sort of boogeyman list is the all-in one-hit kill type list, where I don't know exactly how many attacks you're running. It's probably a little bit more than 4, but you're basically just full selling out to trying to, turn your whole stage sideways, play an unblockable flash move, and cancel any sort of hate that they might have to deal with it. And outside of maybe some stuff that's on characters and evading copy, for the most part, the idea is that there's not going to be a whole lot that's going to be able to outdo that strategy. That probably has a few too many holes to be real, but people are going to be trying it. I think we'll see plenty of decks that are playing. They'll have that in their pocket, but they're also prepared to play a bit of a more honesty game if they are facing the invading copies of the world or that sort of thing, with more normal attack lineups and different avenues to win. But yeah, plainly a very good character. I think we're going to see him off of Life and Void primarily. There's some good symbol builds or air builds that get access to Phantom Thread as their flash move, but there are flash moves on Life Void as well, so yeah, certainly the leading vote getter in this poll. Next up, both at 24%, Bertolt Hoover Living Weapon. That's Bertolt 2, you might hear him referred to as. Certainly the peak concern of the format right now. His play patterns are very degenerate when he gets going. He does take a little bit of time, so he's susceptible to getting rushed down. Not that he's incapable of winning before he flips, but it's much harder for him to do so. He's still quite good at it, right? Filtering 2 on every attack is still very, very good. But a lot of those decks are trying to get to 9 as soon as possible, so they give up a little bit of their equity there, I think is the word. But yeah, certainly a character a lot of people are concerned about. We saw it perform pretty well, but not completely dominant at this past webcam event, and I'm sure people are going to keep working on this and trying to optimize it more than just the, literally day after release builds that we saw on Saturday. The other 24% is Ymir. Maybe a little bit surprising to see it this high because we haven't seen Ymir's play rate be quite this high, but lots and lots of people interested in this character. Arguably held down, probably not even arguably, almost certainly held down by Smiling Titan, got some tools in this latest set. She can put a lot of damage on a string of moves with certainly some effort. There's some deck building effort that goes into it, but once she flips and she gets the Immortal Shapeshifters going and her other gain health triggers, she can count up to plus 6, 7, 8, 9 damage on every attack, which is quite a lot for a 7-hander to be doing. It's pretty hard to defend. Like Bertolt, takes a little bit of a time, has to figure out how she's going to play defense early. Her The life symbol didn't really have anything that could deal with Smiling Titan in that context, so that was holding her down a bit. The fire symbol does, but didn't have as much ways to gain health, so it was a little in between. But now there's more life attuned stuff that you can run even on a fire list, so you get to run Barrier Shield if you're worried about defense on that metric. So yeah, lots of interest in Ymir right now. 20% Rodon, not a surprise at all. A lot of people consider Rodon to be the best character in the format, at least in terms of characters that play the game kind of normally. That plus X or minus X speed is very often a free plus 3 or minus 3 speed on every attack, which is just a lot. Pretty much any 7-hander that does plus or minus speed for relatively free has been good, and Rodon is no exception. And, you know, the deck stacking, maybe not quite Eraserhead having access to erase levels of good, but still, you know, nothing to overlook. It's still pretty good to be able to peek the top of your deck and do some manipulation there. At 18%, we have Godzilla, King of the Monsters. Another one that is maybe a little bit higher than his play rate would indicate, but a lot of people see him as a good potential answer for Bertolt Hoover Living Weapon in particular. And a lot of these decks that want to take some time, you know, Godzilla just coming in and slamming a bunch of high diff attacks very early and trying to race them down, it is a potentially popular strategy. He's seen, shows up in almost every top cuts, I want to say, so he's seen some tournament success. Pretty good character. Hasn't, I guess the second UK regional was a Godzilla mirror in the finals, so I can't say that he's never gone all the way. But you know, definitely a popular choice for people to be giving a look at in terms of probably this is, yeah, I guess that would make him the top aggro choice, because none of these other four, Bertolt's kind of aggro, but he's more of I'm gonna transform one band character into a different band character on turn 3 or 4 kind of deck. Next up, 16% of people looking at Devil Jin, and this is, you definitely want limited chances, right? But we haven't seen Devil Jin make a huge splash just yet. But lots of people are brewing something, or they're interested in brewing something. Various potential degeneracies you can do with this character, just pulling attacks out of your discard pile, playing high attack rates, you know, whatever the card pool effects on the attacks you can grab are. There's lots of different things you can do with him, so lots of people are looking at that. Another potential big aggro choice. 16% on King Ghidorah and Pony as well. Sort of meta mainstays. They've been around and doing well at events for pretty much the whole time that they've been legal. Nothing too shocking there. Pony's late game offense, of course, is every bit as good as, you know, a Bertolt 2 or Mikasa before she got errata, just clearing the card pool repeatedly, playing a very, very long string, having lots of card access. A little bit more defense on her face, a little bit more of a capacity to do stuff early, but not quite as rampantly degenerate as Bertolt 2 gets, so arguably more fair, but still very, very good. Ghidorah, multiple health bars, gets to play all of the you have 10 or less health effects, which there's a bunch of very good ones that you get. Kind of cheesy considering he actually has more than 30 health effectively. Gets to go find the card of the choice out of your discard pile and play it. It's just a good, statistically solid character that, you know, doesn't have an obvious win path printed on his face, but when you have as much, you know, free stats that those 10 or less gives you and the other tools in the card selection, he's able to find a way to figure it out. 15% each for Recovery Girl and Sasha. Recovery Girl just got a bit of an upgrade from the latest set, so lots of people looking at her, you know, also potentially, you know, as a choice to deal with some of the other things. She's a bit of a mixed bag in terms of her matchups. She has a lot of lopsided ones one way or another deck that takes a little bit of time to get going, so a little bit exposed to, you know, really crush your face in aggro, but once she gets set up, there's, you know, a decent range of decks that can't really do anything about her game plan, so some interest there. Some people, you know, feel like it fits their style or whatnot. Sasha Blouse at 15%. Lots of excitement for the second version of Sasha. Kind of a new age Amajiki, stacking up lots of momentum and using it for, you know, a big statistical blowout kind of attack turn. Not too much to say. You know, 6-hand size, not quite aggro. Another scaling 6-hand size character, which have a pretty good track record, I want to say, in the recent years. Just thinking back to things like Endeavor and whatnot. And then I think we have 5 more before we get to a big list. 12% looking at Irwin Smith, Irwin 1. Still some interest in him despite the risky and twisting Azure bans. As while that does slow him down a little bit, he doesn't necessarily need to race Smiling Titan anymore, so he gets probably one more turn to work with there. Still gets to run the Death Casino stuff very well, still gets Aaron's Trial in particular to mix into that list, still a 7-hander with plus or minus speed, which is always good. So a bunch of people still interested in Irwin Smith despite the bans. Another 12% looking at Han Zoe Four Eyes. You know, they're a bit of an interesting case. They also get to do Death Casino stuff. A little bit weirder shape. We've seen some people talk about 4-check heavy builds with this character. Just because they get to sort of refund their payments by sacrificing foundations, readying, committing to past checks, building from hand, trying to make that work. Same symbols as Smiling could have a Han Smiling, you know, board side combination in some way. So a bunch of interest in that new character. Another new character with a lot of interest is Reiner Braun Warrior. Reiner 2. This character is almost a power creep of Endeavor 3. In a sort of way, you get a little bit of a deck building requirement in terms of you have to be running at least some assets, if not, you know, some actions or backups to try to get, you know, the full power out of this. But, you know, on his front side, Reiner is very much like Endeavor. He's gonna mill for speed, and then once he cycles, he's gonna mill for speed and damage. And when you get halfway through his meaty health, the other side gets more guaranteed, slightly less random speed and damage by removing from the discard pile and a couple other effects, picking up some momentum, that sort of thing. So kind of obvious why there's interest in him. He's shaped like a character that's had a lot of success in the past. Himiko Toga still hanging around at 11%, just a popular go-to aggro deck. Lost risky encounter, but didn't need it to be pretty good before, so lots of people still interested in playing Toga 3. Paul Phoenix at 10%. This has cooled off a little bit. There was a lot of early excitement for Paul Phoenix, or a concern about his power level, maybe more so than excitement. Seems like as people have tried him out, that's dropped off a little bit, but still enough people that are looking and thinking they might be able to make him work to register at 10% on this poll. Next up, we have a whole bunch in this 5 to 8% range. Just not going to spend too much time on each. Byaka we've seen around. Kenny Ackerman, Historia, a couple new characters that are getting some interest. Endeavor 3 still around. This is probably people looking mostly to play off of Order or Earth, because if you're going to play him off of Fire, you should probably be playing Reiner 2. Mimic, you know, always going to have some popularity. Toga 4 is still hanging around in the back of some people's minds. Wolfwood as a possible Death Casino list, I would assume. Not necessarily Death Symbol, right? Most of those cards are splashable, but he has an avenue to play that stuff, as well as Bakugo 4. Same thing, although, again, you know, lost risky. Not sure how much he actually needed or not, but put up such a show in the UK, it's not a surprise to see him still on a bunch of people's list. So that rounds up the characters that got, I think it was 4 or more responses would have put them into these percentage brackets. And just to rattle off a bunch of honorable mentions, I think all of these got 3 responses each for like 4%. Irwin 2 is on there, Hawks, Jester Lavore, Martial Law, Mineta 2, Momo 3. Reiner 1 had a few people mentioning him in the replies even before the event. Maybe those were knowers who are familiar with TC's list in advance. Ryukyu 1 still has some interest despite the errata. Still some people looking at Amajiki. Vixelia on this list. She's gotten a bunch more ranged weapon cards from the new set that might have some eyes on her, as well as Zeke Yeager. And that's a wrap. That'll do it for this poll. I hope this was interesting. Shout out in the comments if any of these surprised you, anything you were surprised not to see on here. I think something that strikes me is that if you go back a year ago and told people that 1 year from now nobody would be considering playing Overhaul or Mirio, that would be pretty wild, and here we are. But I'm sure there's some other stuff out there that's kind of a surprising absence, but those two stand out to me. Yeah, hope you enjoyed it. Might do more of these in the future if people like this. Yeah, until next time, have a good night.